Galaxy Council in panic as humanity refuses peace talks. The Great Hall of the Galactic Council was the largest room ever built by any species in the known universe. Its walls stretched upward for nearly a mile, made of crystal that had been grown over thousands of years. Light from distant stars filtered through the ceiling, creating patterns that shifted and changed with the movement of the galaxy itself. For 10,000 years, this hall had been the center of galactic civilization. Every major decision, every treaty, every declaration of war or peace had been made within these walls. Today, the hall was filled with chaos. Ambassador of the Dominion stood at the central podium, his four arms waving frantically as he tried to restore order. His gray skin had turned almost white with stress, and his large black eyes darted from one section of the chamber to another. Around him, representatives from over 200 species shouted, argued, and in some cases physically threatened each other. "Order, I demand order," shouted, his voice amplified by the ancient sound system built into the podium. "This council will maintain proper behavior." No one listened. High Chancellor of the Empire slammed his massive fist on his desk, cracking the ancient wood. He was a huge creature, standing nearly 8 feet tall, with thick green scales covering his entire body. His species had been warriors for longer than most civilizations had existed, and they were not used to feeling afraid. Right now was terrified. "They destroyed 40% of our border fleet," he roared, his voice cutting through the noise. 40% in a single engagement, and now they refuse to even speak with us. "Perhaps if your fleet had not attacked their colony world, they would be more willing to negotiate," replied Ambassador of the Collective. She was a tall, thin being with skin that glowed faintly blue. Her species was known for their intelligence and their vast network of spies and information gatherers. "Our intelligence clearly showed that humanity posed no threat to territory." "They were expanding too quickly," shot back. "Their population was growing at an alarming rate. Their technology was advancing faster than any species we have ever encountered. They needed to be contained before they became a real threat." "And how well did that work out for you?" asked, her voice dripping with sarcasm. Scales turned a darker shade of green, a sign of intense anger among his species. For a moment, it looked like he might leap across the chamber and attack the ambassador. But before he could move, another voice cut through the argument. "Enough." The single word was spoken quietly, but somehow it carried to every corner of the massive chamber. Everyone fell silent and turned to look at the speaker. Elder of the Owl Confederation slowly rose from his seat. He was ancient beyond measure, his body withered and bent with age. His species had been traveling the stars when most of the council races were still learning to walk upright. They rarely spoke in council meetings, preferring to observe and record rather than participate in politics. When an owl did speak, everyone listened. "This arguing serves no purpose," said, his voice thin but steady. "The situation is clear. Humanity has defeated both the Dominion and the Empire in open warfare. They have refused all attempts at communication. They have closed their borders completely, and now they are building more ships." "Building more ships?" asked, his voice rising with alarm. "How many more?" "Our observers estimate that their shipyard production has increased by 300% in the last 6 months," replied. "At their current rate, they will have more warships than the Empire within 2 years. Within 5 years, they will have more than the Dominion and Empire combined." The chamber erupted in chaos once again. 6 standard months earlier, things had been very different. Captain stood on the bridge of the destroyer Relentless, watching the stars streak past on the main. He was a tall man with broad shoulders and close-cropped gray hair. 20 years in the Earth Defense Force had left him with a face that looked like it had been carved from stone, showing little emotion regardless of the circumstances. Right now, those circumstances were pretty bad. "Status report," he said calmly. Lieutenant Amy looked up from her console, her young face tight with worry. 12 warships approaching from bearing 27 Mark IV. They'll be in weapons range in approximately 8 minutes. Just 12 asked. Sorry. I was expecting more. They usually travel in larger groups, walk to the tactical display and study the approaching ships. They were standard cruisers, each one about twice the size of the Relentless. In a straight fight, any one of them could probably destroy his ship. 12 of them should be more than enough to vaporize his entire squadron. Should be. Signal the fleet said. All ships to attack formation Delta 7. We're going in. Lieutenant Commander Tony, the ship's executive officer, stepped closer to his captain. Sir, Delta 7 is an offensive formation. Are you sure that's wise? We're outnumbered 6-1. I'm aware of the numbers, Commander. Turned to face his crew. Every officer on the bridge was watching him, waiting for orders. Some of them looked scared. Most of them just looked determined. They have been pushing into our territory for 3 weeks now. They've destroyed 2 mining stations and killed over 400 civilians. Earth Command has ordered us to stop them. With 2 destroyers and 4 corvettes against 12 cruisers, asked. With whatever we have. His voice hardened. Those are our orders, Commander, and even if they weren't, I wouldn't let these bastards get away with what they've done, not while I'm still breathing. Held his captain's gaze for a moment, then nodded slowly. Understood, sir. I'll relay the orders. Turned back to the ships were visible now, their distinctive triangular shapes growing larger as they approached. They were moving in a standard formation, spread out to maximize their firing arcs and minimize the damage from any single attack. It was a good formation. Textbook, really. They had been fighting wars for thousands of years, and they had developed their tactics through centuries of experience. They knew exactly how to approach an enemy fleet, how to position their ships for maximum effect, how to coordinate their fire to destroy targets one by one. What they didn't know was how humans fought. All ships in position, reported. Formation Delta 7 is ready. Good, sat down in his command chair and fastened the restraints. All hands brace for combat maneuvers. This is going to get rough. The Relentless surged forward, her engines screaming as they pushed the ship to maximum acceleration. Around her, the other human vessels did the same, all 6 ships racing directly toward the formation. On the flagship, Commander watched the human ships approach with something close to amusement. He had fought many species in his long career, and he had seen this behavior before. Desperate defenders, hopelessly outmatched, making a final charge in the hopes of achieving a glorious death. It was admirable in a way. Foolish, but admirable. They're coming straight at us, his tactical officer reported. No evasive maneuvers, no attempt to spread out, they're just charging. They probably think they can break through our formation and escape into the asteroid field behind us, replied. It's a common tactic among less developed species. Order all ships to concentrate fire on the lead vessel. Once it's destroyed, the others will likely surrender. Yes, Commander. The ships opened fire, their plasma cannons sending brilliant blue bolts of energy streaking toward the approaching humans. Space lit up with the exchange of fire as the human ships shot back, their smaller weapons seeming almost pathetic compared to the barrage. The first volley should have destroyed the lead human destroyer. It was a perfectly coordinated attack, with all 12 ships firing at exactly the right moment to concentrate their firepower on a single target. The plasma bolts converged on the Relentless, enough energy to vaporize a small moon. The Relentless wasn't there. At the last possible moment, the human ship had changed course, its engines somehow pushing it sideways at an impossible angle. The plasma bolts passed through empty space, and before they could adjust their aim, the human ships were among them. What happened next was something that tactical doctrine had no answer for. Instead of trying to escape, the human ships dove directly into the middle of the formation. They wove between the larger cruisers, staying so close that they couldn't fire without risking hitting their own ships. And while they maneuvered, they kept shooting. Human weapons were smaller than weapons, but they fired much faster, and at point-blank range, they didn't miss. The Relentless raked the belly of a cruiser with sustained fire, her guns tearing through armor that had never been designed to withstand attack from such close range. Secondary explosions rippled through the enemy ship as ammunition and fuel ignited. "What are they doing?" Commander shouted, watching in horror as one of his cruisers broke apart. "This is insane. No one fights like this." Another human ship, the corvette Dagger, flew directly over the top of a vessel, so close that her hull actually scraped against the enemy's armor. As she passed, she released a spread of missiles directly into the cruiser's engine section. The detonation was spectacular, sending the ship spinning out of control into one of its neighbors. Within 5 minutes, half of the formation had been destroyed or disabled. The surviving ships were scattered, their careful formation completely broken. Commander stared at his tactical display, unable to comprehend what he was seeing. "How," he whispered, "how is this possible?" He never got an answer. The Relentless appeared directly in front of his bridge, close enough that could see the scorch marks on her hull from the battle. For a brief moment, he found himself looking directly at Captain through the viewport. The human captain nodded once, almost respectfully. Then the Relentless fired. News of the battle reached Earth within hours. The military tried to keep it quiet, but in the age of instant communication, that was impossible. By the end of the day, every human in the galaxy knew what had happened. 6 ships against 12, all enemy vessels destroyed, human losses 0. President Diana read the report in her office, her hands trembling slightly. She was a small woman with silver hair and sharp eyes that missed nothing. 20 years in politics had taught her to keep her emotions hidden, but right now she was struggling. "This changes everything," she said quietly. Admiral Jack nodded. He was a large man with a permanent scowl and a reputation for speaking his mind regardless of the consequences. "Yes, ma'am, it does. They are going to be furious. They've never lost a battle like this, not to anyone." "No, ma'am, they haven't." Stood up and walked to the window. Outside, the lights of New Washington stretched to the horizon, home to over 50 million people. Beyond the city, she knew, were hundreds of other human worlds, each one filled with people who were counting on her to keep them safe. "What happens now?" she asked. "That depends on the," replied. "They could accept the defeat and negotiate, or they could escalate." "What do you think they'll do?" Was silent for a long moment. "In my experience, powerful species don't take humiliation well. They have dominated their region of space for over 5,000 years. They've never encountered a species they couldn't conquer. This defeat won't just anger them, it will terrify them. And terrified people do stupid things." Turn back to face him. "You think they'll attack again?" "I think they'll throw everything they have at us. They have to. If word gets out that a species as young as humanity can defeat them in open combat, their entire empire could collapse. The species they've conquered for centuries will start wondering if maybe they could do the same thing. So we're looking at a full-scale war." Nodded grimly. "Yes, ma'am, I believe we are." Sat back down at her desk and pulled up a strategic display. It showed the current position of every human military vessel, every colony, every station. Compared to the vast territories of the Dominion, humanity's holdings looked tiny, insignificant. "Can we win?" she asked. "I don't know," admitted. "But I know we won't lose, not easily, and if they want to fight, we'll make them pay for every inch of space they try to take." "That's not exactly encouraging, Admiral." "No, ma'am, it isn't," straightened his uniform. "But it's honest, and right now, honest is all I can give you." The response came 3 weeks later. 200 warships, the largest fleet they had assembled in over 1,000 years, crossed into human territory. They moved slowly, deliberately making sure that every human sensor could see them coming. This wasn't just a military operation. It was a message. We are coming, you cannot stop us. Surrender or die. Humanity's response was equally clear. Admiral Kate Cooper stood on the bridge of the carrier Indomitable, watching the fleet approach. She was a veteran of 30 years of service, her face weathered by decades of space travel and combat. She had fought pirates, rebels, and rogue AI systems. She had seen things that would give most people nightmares. She had never seen anything like this. 237 enemy vessels confirmed, her tactical officer reported. Composition: 80 cruisers, 120 destroyers, 37 support ships. And our forces: 62 combat vessels, 12 carriers, 24 destroyers, 26 corvettes. Cooper nodded slowly. The odds were almost 4-1 against them. Any reasonable military commander would retreat, fall back to more defensible positions, try to wear down the enemy through guerrilla tactics and attrition. Kate Cooper had never been a reasonable military commander. "Signal all ships," she said. "We're going to meet them head-on." Her executive officer, Commander Price, stepped closer. "Admiral, with respect, that's suicide. We can't fight a fleet that size in open combat." "No, we can't," Cooper agreed. "Not if we fight the way they expect us to fight, but we're not going to do that." "What are we going to do?" Cooper pulled up a tactical display showing the formation. It was impressive, a massive wall of ships arranged in perfect geometric patterns. Each vessel was in exactly the right position to support its neighbors. Every firing arc was covered. Every approach vector was guarded. It was a formation designed to be unbreakable. Cooper smiled. "Do you see this?" she asked, pointing to the center of the fleet. "Their command ship is right there, surrounded by their heaviest cruisers. They've put it in the most protected position possible." "Standard doctrine," Price replied. "The command ship directs the entire fleet. Without it, their coordination falls apart." "Exactly, so that's what we're going to hit." Price stared at her. "Admiral, that ship is protected by over 50 cruisers. We'd have to fight through the entire fleet to reach it." "Who said anything about fighting through?" Cooper's smile widened. "We're going to go around." What followed was something that military historians would study for centuries. Instead of approaching the fleet directly, Cooper split her forces into 3 groups. 2 groups, each containing about 20 ships, began moving toward the flanks of the formation. They were clearly visible, clearly threatening, and they responded exactly as Cooper had predicted. They began repositioning their ships to meet the flanking attacks, pulling vessels away from the center to reinforce the sides. That's when Cooper struck. The 3rd group, containing the Indomitable and her escorts, had been hiding in the shadow of a small moon. They had shut down all non-essential systems, making themselves almost invisible to sensors. Now, with the enemy distracted by the flanking attacks, they accelerated to maximum speed and dove straight into the gap that had opened in the center of the formation. By the time they realized what was happening, it was too late. The Indomitable's fighters launched in a swarm, hundreds of small craft racing toward the enemy command ship. Behind them came the destroyers, their weapons blazing. The ships tried to respond, but they were out of position, their carefully planned formation disrupted by Cooper's feint. The command ship's shields held against the first wave of attacks. They held against the second wave too, but by the 3rd wave they were beginning to fail. Cracks appeared in the energy barrier, widening with each impact. Admiral, commanding the fleet, watched in disbelief as his defensive perimeter collapsed. "All ships, fall back to defensive positions. Protect the command ship." But his orders came too late. The ships were already moving to respond to the flanking attacks. They couldn't reverse course quickly enough to save their flagship. The Indomitable's main battery fired a single, concentrated burst of energy directly at the command ship's bridge. The shields, already weakened, couldn't stop it. The bolt punched through armor and bulkheads like they weren't there, vaporizing everything in its path. Admiral had just enough time to realize he had been outmaneuvered before his ship exploded around him. The battle continued for another 3 hours, but the outcome was never in doubt. Without their command ship to coordinate them, the fleet fell into chaos. Ships fired on each other by accident. Orders were misunderstood or ignored. Retreat became a rout. When it was over, 173 vessels had been destroyed or captured. Human losses totaled 8 ships destroyed, 12 damaged. It was the worst defeat in history. The news reached the Galactic Council within hours, and the reaction was immediate. Emergency sessions were called. Ambassadors demanded explanations. Military advisors were brought in to analyze what had happened. None of them could explain it. "It's not possible," High Chancellor declared, his voice shaking with a mixture of anger and fear. "They are one of the oldest military powers in the galaxy. They have techniques and technologies that have been refined over. How could they lose to a species that has only been in space for 2 centuries? "The humans didn't fight fair," Ambassador replied bitterly. "They used tricks and deceptions. They refused to engage in honorable combat." "Honorable combat is for fools who want to die gloriously," Admiral of the Empire said. He was studying the battle reports with intense interest, his tactical mind analyzing every detail. "The humans fought to win, and they did." "This is a threat to all of us," another ambassador said, a representative named. "If humanity can defeat the so easily, what's to stop them from attacking the rest of us?" "Nothing," replied simply, "absolutely nothing." The chamber fell silent as the implications of his words sank in. "We need to do something," said finally. "We can't just sit here and wait for them to come for us." "What do you suggest?" asked. "Another attack. They threw 200 ships at them and lost almost all of them. Do you want to try with 300, 400? "If necessary, yes," slammed his fist on the table again. "The Empire has over 10,000 warships. Surely we can overwhelm them with sheer numbers." "Can you?" The question came from Elder, who had been silent throughout the debate. "Tell me, Chancellor, what do you know about human history?" Looked confused. "Their history, they're a young species. They've only had space travel for a few centuries. Before that, they were confined to a single planet." "Yes, a single planet. And do you know what they did on that planet for thousands of years before they reached the stars?" "I don't see what that has to do with anything." "They fought." His voice was soft, but it carried to every corner of the chamber. "They fought each other, constantly, endlessly, war after war after war, for as long as their recorded history exists. They developed weapons specifically designed to kill other humans. They built entire industries around warfare. They studied combat the way other species study art or science." He paused, letting his words sink in. "When we first encountered other species," continued, "most of us had to learn how to fight. We had evolved in relatively peaceful environments where cooperation was more useful than conflict. We developed weapons because we needed them for defense, not because warfare was in our nature. Humans are different. They evolved on a world that was constantly trying to kill them. Predators, diseases, natural disasters, and each other. Only the strongest and most cunning survived. They didn't develop warfare as a tool. They developed it as an art form." "That's impossible," protested. "No species could survive that kind of constant conflict." And yet they did. Not only survived, but thrived. They went from primitive stone tools to nuclear weapons in less than 10,000 years. They split the atom and walked on their moon within decades of learning to fly. And when they finally reached the stars, they brought all that knowledge, all that experience, all that instinct for warfare with them. Rose slowly from his seat, his ancient bones creaking with the effort. "You ask what we should do about humanity. I will tell you what we should not do. We should not make them our enemy. Because if we do, we will lose. Maybe not today, maybe not tomorrow, but eventually, inevitably, we will lose. Because they have been fighting since before they could walk upright, and we have only been fighting because we had to. Then what do you suggest? Asked desperately. We just let them take over the galaxy. I suggest we talk to them, find out what they want. Perhaps we can reach an accommodation that satisfies everyone. Talk to them? Laughed bitterly. After what they did after they humiliated the most powerful military force in the quadrant, you think they'll want to talk? I don't know, admitted, but I know that fighting them is suicide. At least talking gives us a chance. The debate continued for hours, but eventually the council reached a consensus. They would send an ambassador to humanity. They would offer peace, friendship, and a place among the great powers of the galaxy. They would hope that the humans would accept. They were about to be very disappointed. Ambassador was chosen to lead the diplomatic mission. She was skilled at reading other species, at understanding their motivations and desires. She had negotiated dozens of treaties and resolved countless conflicts. If anyone could make peace with humanity, it was her. Her ship arrived at the edge of human space 3 weeks later. She had come alone, as a gesture of good faith, in a vessel that carried no weapons and minimal defenses. She had spent the entire journey studying everything the council knew about humans, trying to understand how they thought, what they valued, what they feared. She was not prepared for what happened next. Attention, unidentified vessel. The voice came through her communication system, speaking in perfect. You have entered human space. State your identity and purpose. I am ambassador of the collective, she replied, keeping her voice calm and diplomatic. I come on behalf of the Galactic Council to discuss peace between our peoples. There was a long pause. Then, hold your position. A vessel will be sent to escort you. Waited. An hour passed. Then 2. She was beginning to wonder if they had forgotten about her when a ship finally appeared on her sensors. It was small, barely the size of a shuttle, but there was something about it that made uneasy. It moved too quickly, changed direction too sharply. It didn't fly like any ship she had ever seen. Follow us, the voice said. Do not deviate from the course we set or you will be destroyed. Followed. The journey took 3 days. They passed through multiple systems, each one filled with human activity. Mining stations, shipyards, colonies, military bases. The scale of it was staggering. Humanity had only been a spacefaring species for 200 years, and already they had built an empire that rivaled powers 10 times their age. Finally, they arrived at Earth. Had seen many in her long career, but Earth was unlike any of them. It was small, barely visible against the backdrop of stars, but the space around it was filled with more activity than she had ever seen in one place. Thousands of ships moved in carefully choreographed patterns. Orbital stations hung like jewels against the black, and everywhere there were weapons. Platforms bristling with missile launchers, satellites carrying energy cannons, minefields that stretched for millions of kilometers. This was not a planet, it was a fortress. Her escort brought her to a space station in high orbit, where she was met by a human woman with hard eyes and a military uniform covered in medals. I'm Admiral Kate Cooper, the woman said. I've been assigned to be your liaison during your visit. Admiral Cooper replied, bowing slightly. I am honored to meet you. Your reputation precedes you. Does it? Cooper's expression didn't change. What exactly have you heard? That you are the most brilliant tactical mind humanity has produced. That you destroyed a fleet 4 times the size of your own. That you have never lost a battle. The last part isn't quite true, Cooper said. I've lost plenty of battles, I've just never lost a war. She gestured toward a doorway. This way, please, President is waiting for you. The walk to the president's office took them through a maze of corridors and security checkpoints. Everywhere looked, she saw humans. Soldiers, technicians, bureaucrats, civilians. They all stopped what they were doing to watch her pass, their expressions ranging from curious to hostile. She had never felt so vulnerable in her life. President was waiting in a large office with windows that looked out over the blue curve of Earth. She was smaller than had expected, almost fragile-looking, but there was something in her eyes that reminded of a predator waiting to strike. "Ambassador," said, gesturing to a chair, "please sit, we have much to discuss." "Thank you, President," settled into the chair, trying to appear calm despite her growing unease. "I bring greetings from the Galactic Council. We wish to discuss the possibility of peace between humanity and the other species of the galaxy." "Peace," repeated. "That's an interesting word. What exactly does the Council mean by peace?" Had expected this question and had prepared her answer carefully. "The Council is prepared to offer humanity full membership, with all the rights and privileges that entails. You would have a voice in galactic affairs, access to our technology and resources, protection under Council law. In exchange, we ask only that you agree to certain basic principles: no aggressive expansion, no unprovoked attacks on other member species, respect for existing treaties and agreements." Listened without interrupting. When finished, she was silent for a long moment. "That's a generous offer," she said finally. "Very generous. The Council must be quite concerned about us." "We prefer to think of it as an opportunity," replied diplomatically. "Humanity has shown remarkable capabilities. The Council believes that working together would benefit everyone." "Working together," repeated, "under Council rules, following Council leadership, accepting Council decisions." "The Council is a democratic body. Humanity would have equal representation." "Equal representation in a body controlled by species that have been in space while we've barely been there for 2 centuries. Shook her head slowly. "That's not equality, Ambassador. That's submission wearing a fancy dress." Felt a chill run down her spine. This was not going the way she had hoped. "President, I understand your concerns, but surely you must see that cooperation is better than conflict. The wars you have fought so far have been against individual species. If humanity continues on this path, you will eventually face the combined might of the entire Council. No species, no matter how capable, can stand against that." "Can't they?" smiled, but there was no warmth in it. "Ambassador, let me tell you something about humanity. We've been fighting for our survival since the beginning of our existence, not just against other species, but against our own planet, against ourselves. We've faced extinction more times than I can count, and every single time we've found a way to survive." She leaned forward, her eyes boring into us. "The Council looks at us and sees a young species that got lucky a few times, but luck had nothing to do with it. We won those battles because we're better at war than anyone else in this galaxy, not because we're stronger or more advanced, but because we understand something that the rest of you don't." "And what is that?" asked, her voice barely above a whisper. "That there's no such thing as a fair fight. That rules and honor and tradition are just words people use to make themselves feel better about losing. That the only thing that matters is winning, and we will do whatever it takes to win." Sat back in her chair. "So here's my counteroffer, Ambassador. Go back to the Council. Tell them that humanity is not interested in their peace. Tell them that we will continue to expand, to build, to grow stronger. And tell them that if they try to stop us, we will destroy them. Not because we want to, but because we can. And because anyone who threatens our survival needs to understand that the cost of that threat will be higher than they can possibly imagine." Was speechless. In all her years of diplomacy, she had never encountered anything like this. Every species she had dealt with wanted peace, wanted security, wanted to avoid conflict. This human was actively choosing war. "President," she said carefully, "I urge you to reconsider. The Council has resources beyond anything you can imagine, fleets that number in the hundreds of thousands, technologies that humanity hasn't even dreamed of. If this conflict escalates, the destruction will be unimaginable." "Yes," agreed, "it will be for everyone." She stood up, signaling that the meeting was over. "You have our answer, Ambassador. I suggest you deliver it quickly, because every day the Council wastes trying to negotiate is another day we spend building ships." This report to the Council caused an uproar that made the previous debates look like polite conversations. "They refused," High Chancellor shouted, his scales turning almost black with rage. "They actually refused, after everything we offered them." "Not just refused," replied, her voice still shaken by what she had witnessed. "They threatened us, openly, explicitly. They said they would destroy anyone who tried to stop them." "This is madness," Ambassador declared. "They're a single species against the entire galaxy. How can they possibly think they can win?" "They don't think they can win," Elder said quietly. "They know they can win, and based on what I've seen, they might be right." "Then we attack now," slammed both fists on the table this time. "Before they get any stronger, we assemble every ship in the Council and we crush them." "And how many ships will we lose?" Admiral asked. "The lost 200 to a fleet one-third that size. If we send 10,000 ships, how many come back? 5,000, 2,000, none." "Some losses are acceptable in war." "Are they? What happens to your empire while your fleet is being destroyed, Chancellor? How many of the species you've conquered will stay loyal when they learn that the mighty can be beaten?" Opened his mouth to respond, but no words came out. For the first time, he truly understood the trap they were in. "We can't attack them because the cost would be too high," continued. "But we can't leave them alone because they'll just keep getting stronger. And we can't negotiate because they've made it clear they're not interested in peace." "Then what do we do?" asked desperately. Shook his head slowly. "I don't know. For the first time in my very long life, I truly don't know." The chamber fell silent. For the next several hours, proposals were made and rejected. Military options were analyzed and discarded. Diplomatic approaches were suggested and dismissed. Nothing seemed to work. Finally, as the session stretched into its second day, a new voice spoke up. "Perhaps we're looking at this wrong." Everyone turned to face the speaker. It was a young analyst named, barely out of adolescence by her species standards. She had been brought in to provide technical support and had sat silently through the entire debate. "Explain," Elder said, curiosity evident in his ancient voice. "We keep asking what we should do about humanity," said nervously. "But maybe that's the wrong question. Maybe we should be asking what humanity wants." "They want to conquer the galaxy," growled. "They made that quite clear." "Did they?" Pulled up the transcript of his meeting with President. "Read what she actually said. She said they would continue to expand, build, and grow stronger. She said they would destroy anyone who threatened their survival, but she never said they wanted to conquer anyone." "It's the same thing," protested. "Is it? Look at their history. For thousands of years they fought each other constantly. But they also built things. Art, culture, science, philosophy. They didn't just destroy, they created. And when they finally stopped fighting each other and reached for the stars, they didn't immediately try to conquer everyone they met. They colonized empty worlds. They built their own civilization. They only started fighting when we attacked them first." The chamber was silent as everyone processed her words. "You're suggesting that humanity isn't inherently aggressive," said slowly. "That they're simply defensive. That if we leave them alone, they'll leave us alone." "I don't know if that's true," admitted. "But nothing else has worked. Maybe it's worth trying." "Leave them alone," laughed bitterly. "After everything that's happened, just pretend none of it occurred and hope they don't come for us." "Do you have a better idea, Chancellor?" asked. "Because I don't, and neither, it seems, does anyone else." The debate continued, but the tone had changed. Instead of arguing about how to fight humanity, the Council began discussing how to coexist with them. It was a radical shift in thinking, and many of the older species resisted it fiercely. But as the days turned into weeks and no better solution emerged, even the most stubborn voices began to accept the new reality. Humanity was here to stay, and the galaxy would have to adapt. 6 months after Ambassador's failed mission, the Galactic Council convened once again. This time, they had a new proposal to consider. "We offer humanity a seat on the Council," High Arbiter announced, reading from a carefully prepared document. "Full membership with all rights and privileges. No restrictions on their expansion, provided they do not encroach on territory already claimed by other species. No obligations to participate in collective military actions. Complete autonomy in internal affairs." It was, by any reasonable measure, an extraordinary offer. No species in galactic history had been given such favorable terms. The Council was essentially offering humanity everything they had demanded, plus more. "And in exchange," asked the representative. "In exchange, we ask only one thing, that humanity agrees to open diplomatic channels, that they talk to us, that they allow us to understand them and they try to understand us." A message was sent to Earth. The Council waited anxiously for a response. 3 days later, their answer came. "Humanity declines the Council's offer. We have no interest in joining your organization or participating in your politics. Our previous position remains unchanged. Do not threaten us, and we will not threaten you. This communication channel is now closed." 23 words, the shortest diplomatic response in galactic history, and somehow the most terrifying. High Chancellor stared at the message in disbelief. "They said no, again, even to this." "It appears so," replied his voice hollow. "But why? We gave them everything, we asked for nothing. What more could they possibly want?" "I don't think they want anything from us," Elder said quietly. "That's the problem, they don't need us, they don't want us, they simply want us to leave them alone." "And if we don't?" Was silent for a long moment. Then he said, "Then I suspect we will learn exactly how good they are at war, and I suspect we will not like the lesson." The council chamber fell into chaos once again. Representatives shouted at each other, blamed each other, demanded action that no one could agree on. The greatest powers in the galaxy united for the first time in centuries, and they were powerless. Because somewhere out there, in a small corner of the galaxy, a young species had decided that they didn't need anyone's permission to exist. They didn't need treaties or alliances or the approval of ancient civilizations. They just needed to be left alone. And they were willing to destroy anyone who wouldn't grant them that simple request. In her office on Earth, President Diana read the Council's response to her rejection. She smiled slightly, then turned to Admiral Cooper. "They're scared," she said, "really scared." "Good," Cooper replied. "Fear keeps people honest." "Do you think they'll try anything?" "Eventually, probably, but not for a while. They need time to figure out their next move. Time we'll use to keep building." Cooper paused. "Ma'am, can I ask you something?" "Of course." "Do we actually have a plan, a long-term strategy, or are we just making this up as we go?" Laughed softly. "Kate, humanity has been making it up as we go for our entire existence. Why stop now?" She turned back to the window, looking out at the stars. "We'll figure it out. We always do. That's what makes us human." And out in the darkness of space, the galaxy held its breath, waiting to see what humanity would do next. No one knew for certain, but everyone was afraid to find out. Because the humans were not like anyone else, they didn't follow the rules, they didn't respect tradition, they didn't fear death. They just kept coming. No matter what you threw at them, no matter how many times you knocked them down, they kept coming. And sooner or later, they always won. That was the truth that the Galactic Council was beginning to understand. That was the reality that kept High Chancellor awake at night. That was the fear that had spread through every civilization in the known universe. Humanity was no longer just a curiosity. They were no longer just a threat. They were the future. And the future was refusing to negotiate.